back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Saturday, and for today's video, I have a furniture flip for you guys. The little table that I made over is one that was actually purchased by me many years ago, and I really just didn't have room for it in our new house, and so I decided to give it a makeover. So I hope you guys enjoy today's project, and without further ado, let's get to the video. So as I mentioned, this is the little entry table that I'm working on for today's video. This is my personal table that we used to have right inside our front door. The knob that's missing is because that was the knob that was closest to the door that we always used to catch on everything. So it was lost several years ago. I've had this table for probably 25 years or so. Now, it just didn't fit in my new house. I tried moving it around into several different places and just couldn't find the right spot for it. So I decided it was time to let it go. And rather than just sell it on Marketplace, I thought I would give it a little updo and try and sell it in the shop. So that's what I'm doing. I started by giving it a really good sanding with some 120 grit sandpaper and giving it a good wash with some mineral spirits. And then I'm going in with a very dark stain and just applying that with a paper towel. Once the stain is set and dry, I am going over it with a couple coats of this top coat by General Finishes. I've had this in my stash for a while and I'm just trying to kind of use it up at this point. And I'm just applying that with a sponge applicator and then letting it dry completely between coats. Now, once I was finished giving this a few good coats of the General Finishes top coat, I let it set to dry really well, and I realized it had this lovely ring that had shown up through the stain and the top coat. Now, this little halo was created from the heat of a wax melter that I had sitting on this table for many, many years in the same place. So I was fairly disappointed, obviously, and I really contemplated on just going ahead and painting over the stain, but in the end I decided to give it another try. So I went in with my rotary sander this time because my other one is giving me fits, and I started with some 80 grit sandpaper, followed that up with some 150 grit sandpaper. Then I washed it down really well with some water. Somebody told me that that would help raise the grain and hopefully help me get that stain removed. So that's what I did. And I forgot to film myself going back over it with the sandpaper, but I did go back over it with some 150 grit sandpaper again, followed by some 220. Once that was all done, I went ahead and stained it. I picked a different color. I wasn't really happy with the super dark original color, but then the first coat that I put down was too red and too light, so I went over it with the dark color, and this is what I ended up with. Much better, I thought. And again, once the stain was dry, it was back to adding my top coat, and I'm using that same General Finishes flat out flat for this and applying it with my sponge applicator. I ended up putting on 3 coats of the top coat, letting it dry completely between each coat. Once I was finally back to where I started from, it was time to move on to paint. For this, I chose Sweet Pickins milk paint in the color Birdie. Now, if you've never used milk paint before, it's definitely a little different than just opening a standard can of paint. This comes in a powder and you have to mix it with water, and it's 1 part paint to 1 part warm water. And I use a little milk frother to mix my paint just because it does have a propensity for being a little bit chunky at times. Now, milk paint's also the only paint that I know of that can give you a chippy finish. However, if you don't want a chippiness or crackling in your paint, they have an additive called Extra Bond that's kind of a binder that you can add to the paint to make sure that it sticks to your surface. For this piece, since it did have a finish on it and I didn't want any chippiness, I did go ahead and add the recommended amount of Extra Bond, which is half the amount of water and paint. And here I'm going over the first coat with that second coat. This paint is also very highly pigmented, and a lot of the times if you're going over something lighter in color with a darker color, you only need a couple coats of paint. And so in this case, I only had to go over this table with 2 coats of the Birdie paint. Now, a lot of the time with milk paint, no matter how much you mix it, you still end up with a few little chunks on your piece. So I always go over my finished pieces with some 220 grit sandpaper to make sure they're nice and smooth before I seal them. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going over the entire piece with some 220 grit sandpaper and my palm sander on its very lowest setting. I'm also doing just a little bit of distressing as I go, just on the corners and the edges to bring some of the rich wood tone through that Birdie paint. I understand not everyone is a fan of distressing though, so if you don't like that look, you can absolutely skip that step. Once I was finished with the body of my little table, I did move on to the drawers, and then I removed the tape that I'd put on there so I had a nice sharp line between the stain and the paint on the bottom of the tabletop. And then I took it back inside, and here's what it looks like now. Then I went ahead and gave it a really good bath with some water and a shop towel to get rid of all of that sanding dust. And since my plan here is to add a transfer to the front of this table, making sure that my surface is clean and dry is very, very important. For my transfer set, I chose this gorgeous new one by Redesign with Prima that's called Blossom Breeze, and it has a ton of beautiful florals and greenery to choose from. Now, before I start actually attaching the transfers to the front of my piece, I like to take some time and just kind of play with the bits and pieces, almost like putting a puzzle together, moving them around and arranging them until I come up with a composition that I'm happy with. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm trying to keep in mind which pieces I want in the background and which ones I want in the foreground. And when I begin to apply my transfers, I'm going to need to apply the background pieces first and then layer the foreground pieces over the top of them. So I'm trying to make sure that things like stems and little pieces that I don't want showing in my final product are in the back, and then I'm covering those up with the flowers or leaves that I'm putting on over the top of them. So you can see here, the first thing I'm putting down is a leaf that needs to be tucked back behind the larger flower. So I'm leaving the larger flower in place and then just tucking that leaf underneath it so that when I do apply the larger flower, it will cover the beginning of the stem. Then I move on to placing any other pieces that need to be behind that larger flower, like this little grouping of flowers here. And so I'm just peeling off that backing and laying my transfer down, smoothing it out with my hand. Then you could see I had to cut it so that it would go over the gap in the drawer. And then I'm just rubbing it down like always with my transfer stick while I peel back that piece of vellum. I'm just going to continue working, adding pieces of the transfer set into this little composition until I get the look I'm going for on this drawer. Once I'm finished applying my transfers to the left-hand drawer, it's time to move on to the right side, and I'm doing the same procedure here, just playing with my pieces until I find a composition I'm happy with, and then starting with my first layer down, my background flowers, and just applying them one by one over the top of that. I'm finally done applying all of my transfers, it is time to seal my paint. Like DIY paint, milk paint does need to be sealed with some sort of a top coat. There are many to choose from, but one of my favorites is Sweet Pickins oil wax. And for this piece, I decided to go with the dark oil wax to leave behind a subtle patina over the top of this paint. So I'm just using a little chip brush to apply a good coat of that oil wax everywhere that there's paint. And then I'm going to let that sit over the top of my paint for about 20 minutes while it kind of soaks in. And then once that's done, I will come back in with a dry shop towel and wipe off the excess oil wax. Now, I know at first the dark oil wax can look a little scary when you apply it, almost like you doused your brand new paint job in muddy water. But when you go back in and wipe it back, I just love the look of that patina that this dark oil wax gives the paint. Now, during this process, you just want to make sure that you get all of that excess oil wax removed from your piece. You may have to go through several paper towels to get a dry surface, but you just want to make sure to get all of the oil wax removed. Once it dries, it becomes very, very hard to get back off again without sandpaper. So you just want to get it all off in the first place. The other thing I've noticed about the oil wax is that even after you've wiped it down really, really well, you can still leave fingerprints behind on your piece. So once you've touched it again, you want to make sure and wipe it back and remove any fingerprints that you might have left, because if it dries, those fingerprints will show in your finished product. My last step for this piece is to replace the hardware. I ended up going with some glass knobs that I had purchased at Hobby Lobby, even though I did have another couple of options. I'm really not sure if I'm going to leave the glass knobs on it or change them out for something else. We'll see in the future, but for now, I am just going to go ahead and leave the glass knobs. I absolutely love the end result of this little table. I hope you guys like it as much as I do. Well, that's it from here for today, you guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you liked my little console table makeover. It's kind of funny because looking at it now, I almost wish I would have done something like that with it several years ago. When I first bought it, it was perfect for my house. I liked the rustic look of it, but as the years went by and things changed, it really could have used a makeover, and now I wish I would have done that a lot sooner. And now I guess it's just ready to go on to its new forever home. So there is that. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then, of course, don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of my project for today. Just a quick reminder too, the paint and products that you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. And while we're on the topic of products, I just wanted to let you know that Blossom Breeze transfer in particular, I still have several left on my website. For whatever reason, that one just hasn't sold as well as some of the others, and I think it's a beautiful set, so that's kind of why I highlighted it in today's video. Just so you know, I do carry DIY paint and products as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint and products. And for Sweet Pickins, I just restocked the Bespoke collection and also Oh Olive, which is the 35% off paint for the month of March. And I also carry some Recycled Treasures decoupage papers, which I have more on the way, and some of the new spring collection as well. And I also carry, of course, the Redesign with Prima products, and they are having a new release coming out, I believe, in April. So stay tuned. As soon as I can show you the new products, I absolutely will. Anyway, for, let's see, Wednesday's video, it is more than likely going to be some more flips. I did also just paint a little 3-tier cabinet or bookshelf that I recently picked up at the Goodwill, so I might incorporate that in the video. I've got some other stuff that I've been working on, so it'll probably be thrift or furniture flip or a combination of both. So stay tuned for that on Wednesday. Until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend and beginning of the week. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.